Siomra
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Collecting Issues, where this week we'll be taking a look at Sara, the 2018 series by TKO Studios, collecting issues 1 to 6 of the comic book by Garth Ennis, Steve Epting, and colorist Elizabeth Breitweiser. Close enough. Breitweiser. I'm keeping it.
You nearly did it, Ben.
Nearly did it. But sure, look, we'll keep it in.
Ben, this week's comic book was given to us by a very good friend of the podcast, Cron Crafts.
Yeah, Cron Crafts. And what a recommendation.
What a recommendation. Benjamin, what we should recommend is that people go and have a look at his bloody YouTube channel.
Yeah, it's a good YouTube channel. He is a mine of information, ladies and gentlemen. All things craft related.
Bloody make things.
Yeah, he makes lots of things.
Yeah.
Bloody maker.
Anyway, look. Here's the thing, Ben. You and I,
yes,
both of us,
together.
Not traditionally fans of war comics.
Not our thing, Michael.
Bloody the superhero, the fantastical, the science fictional.
That's our wheelhouse, Michael.
That's our realm.
That's where we live.
Yeah, that's our zone.
Yeah.
So what Cron did was said, here lads, have a look at this. See if this tickles your pickles.
And my pickle is firmly tickled.
Firmly bloody tickled.
Look, it's an unusual comic book, Michael. It comes from TKO Studios, which is a relatively new publishing house on the market.
They're so new, Ben, that they bloody like our posts on Instagram.
They do. That's how new they are. They're not quite above us yet. They're not too far below us, but they're still more successful than we are. But they're relatively new, Michael, and their mission is to make comic book consumption very, very different. They're looking to change the comic book consumption game.
Changing up the game.
And I think just before this podcast, we were saying, let's start basically on packaging here, Michael, which is a very different thing from what we normally do, but it's a very different comic from what we normally have, Michael.
Yeah.
There's a high quality feel to this, Michael.
Yeah, it's very premium.
Yeah, premium. And the two names attached to it are huge. Garth Ennis.
No, they're quite small, look. Probably 7 or 8 millimeters.
I see what you did there. See,
I was talking about the size of the font.
Very good. I meant in terms of significance in the comic book scene, Michael.
Right, go on.
Significance in the comic book scene. Garth Ennis has famously written hundreds of comic books.
Yeah.
Most famously Preacher, The Boys, Punisher. He's a huge Punisher guy.
Yeah. Preacher.
Steve Epting has drawn for Marvel continuously since the start of his career. He had the huge run with Ed Brubaker on Captain America. He's very good at a gritty, down to life. Real to life superhero, down to earth. Yeah. Down to earth superheroes. He's good at that kind of thing. And war comics are kind of his wheelhouse, I suppose, if you want to look at it that way. And Elizabeth Breitweiser, who was responsible for colouring the fantastic cover that has caught many an eye.
Caught your bloody eye anyway.
Caught my bloody eye. Straight away, Michael. Straight away. It's a very interesting comic, Michael. The quality, Michael. The pages.
The pages on it, Ben.
The printing.
It's bigger than a normal comic.
Bigger than a normal comic. It's got a heft to it, Michael. Yeah. It's got a heft to it.
It's bigger than a standard American comic, but smaller than an English comic.
It is, to use a phrase that you have coined many times on our other podcast, Michael, it's very cinematic.
Go on.
Very cinematic.
Yeah.
The size and scale, the art, the pacing. It's a very cinematic style book. It's like following a movie. It's all very realistic.
Ben, why don't you tell us what it's bloody about?
Yeah, that's
Bearing in mind, Ben, that Collecting Issues is a bi-monthly comic book club that people can follow along with, so that everyone who's listening to this, I assume, has already purchased or, well, illegally downloaded some of them probably, but they've read it, more importantly.
Fair enough. In that case.
So look, we're spoilers are not even a concept on this podcast, Ben, because we don't spoil future things. But
yeah, but this is a limited series, Michael.
But everyone who's listening to this has read the bloody comic. If you haven't read the comic, stop listening to this. Go read the bloody comic and then come back and then we'll listen to this. God, I'm getting very aggressive.
Yeah, you all right there?
Yeah, I'm all right.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, so Sarah, you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Is this a good pace?
It's the war comic.
It's the war comic. It got you all riled up. So Sarah is the eponymous character.
Yeah.
Eponymous, I used that correctly.
You did, yeah.
I'm very nervous now about the use of words. She's the eponymous character. She is pretty much the best sniper in a squadron of all female snipers.
Yeah.
And she is what you would call battle hardened. She's just had her humanity kind of stripped away bit by bit during World War II. She's a Soviet sniper taking out the Nazis as
Germans.
They encroach on the motherland. And it really follows her and her moral dilemma, and it kind of charts her erosion of humanity, if you will, how she runs out of empathy and sympathy and things like this, and how pretty much by the end of the comic she just becomes a tool of war. She is the gun that she fires quite often. And it's a really interesting look at a very different aspect of history that might get overlooked quite often. What I didn't realize before reading this comic, Michael, is that Garth Ennis is a huge war comic fan. I mean, we could have put that together from the Punisher
War Journal,
but I didn't know if he would just enjoy the violence element of War Journal. No, but as it turns out, in one interview, he talks about how pretty much growing up, he was into a British war comic anthology series called Battle. And he would very often find out about real life war heroes through the exploits that were written and illustrated in Battle. And it had a huge impact on a young Garth Ennis. Garth Ennis, who was famously a cat that hangs outside this very tiny room.
Ben, this comic book is not based on a true story.
It is not. But it is an amalgamation of various famous female snipers. So Russia has a long history, especially in World War II, of female snipers who were incredibly successful. And the reason for that is during the World War II, during the World War II, it's not World War II to Russians, it's the Great Patriotic or Patriotic, I'm never sure how to say that one.
You work away, you say whatever.
The Great Patriotic War is what it's known as. And believe it or not, there are a number of different theories on this, but women were an equal part. They were used in military combat quite often, and they fulfilled every single job that a man could fulfill. And there's a couple of theories on why this is. Number one is it would fit the equality
egalitarian
edict of Marxist Leninist Marxism.
Yeah, Marx Lenin.
Marxist Leninism or Leninist Marxism, depends on which way you say it. And it would fulfill that, or they were hemorrhaging male soldiers and they needed to make up the deficit somehow.
Just send bodies to the meat grinder.
And I think it would probably be, we would argue that it's probably the latter.
Yeah.
I think if you talk to a Russian, they'd argue it was the former.
Ben,
it depends on who you ask.
Here's the thing, though.
Go on.
The comic book directly contradicts what you've just said there, because in the comic book we find out that they're given every job except infantry.
Oh.
Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. I forgot that. Sorry, Michael.
Because infantry is where... That's where you're sticking bayonets in people. And
real bloody.
That's where the bayonets meet the bodies.
Real bloody.
So, it's based on an amalgamation. It's inspired by true events, not based on a true story. Yeah,
so I think Sara herself, who is the best of them, is probably based on one of Russia's most famous snipers, which is Lyudmila Mikhailova. And then Pavlichenko, which is just a mouthful. We are, to anyone who might be Russian and listening, we're very sorry. I don't speak fluent Russian, and my name pronunciation throughout this episode of Collecting
all over the place
will be a little bit rough. But Miss Pavlichenko had a confirmed 309 kills as a sniper for the Russian military during World War II, which is a phenomenal amount of dead people from a distance.
There's a lot of dead people.
And Sara is rumoured to have murdered roughly the same amount of people. She has a nickname in this. They're calling her the Red Bitch.
Yeah.
The Red Bitch is what the fascists call her, the Nazis. And she's the one that's taking them all out as they encroach on the motherland.
It's interesting that you use the word murder.
Oh, did I use the word murder?
Yeah.
Sorry, not to shame anybody in military service.
Oh, interesting.
Well, that's going to get me in trouble somewhere.
Can you murder an invading army? That's a very moral... Up. Maybe you need to read more war comics, Benjamin.
No, probably not. I don't know what that'd do to me. It'd probably wear me out. Look, from a writing point of view, I came into this and I thought that it would be a real Garth Ennis classic. A lot of blood, a lot of guts, a lot of over-the-top stuff. It's not.
It's very down to earth.
Very restrained.
It's a very realistic, believable story of a unit of women in a bloody war.
Because I wasn't sure if we were going into this with an Inglourious Bastards vibe, where it's very stylized World War II. It's not.
No,
it's a very grim reality of what war might have been like. I'm not going to say what war was because we don't know.
We don't know. We weren't there.
And we weren't there. So it was great. I really enjoyed watching it. Tension is something that I picked up a lot on in this one, Michael. He builds Mr. Ennis, builds
and Mr.
Epting are great at building interpersonal tension between different factions within this female unit. They are very close together, but you can see that Sara throughout unnerves everybody else. Nobody really understands Sara. And Sara seems to be just fully committed to being this weapon of war. And we find out by issue 2, I think, or chapter 2 in this case, as to why that is. She has lost her family in one of the onslaughts by the Nazis. Although
did she, Ben?
And so she committed herself through her training and things like that. And women were quite often put through the sniper program because, as you rightly pointed out, Michael, it was a more long distance finessed art, and they found that women were a little bit better at it in general. And when you look at Russia's published famous snipers, it's about 50-50. There are a lot of women in those ranks. And funnily enough, when you look at the pictures of these women, you'll find a lot of the characters are very similarly drawn to them. They don't have the same names, but there's a likeness to certain characters.
There is a character in here, I've forgotten her name, unfortunately, but she looks a lot like Ludmila Pavlyuchenko.
Yeah, it's... I'm going to look her up now.
I can't remember her name.
I think it's Vera.
It's the one that they call the Beast or the Monster.
She's...
I can't remember her real name. But she has Ludmila's face. Did you find, Ben, that you looked at the characters and went, okay, this is easy. There's the blonde one, the attractive one, the young one. They all had different coloured hair.
There's a reason for...
There's a brown hair, an auburn hair, a blonde hair, a black hair, and a red hair.
There's a reason for that. And again, this comes back to Garth Ennis, who was speaking about how he wrote this. It turns out one of Garth Ennis' favourite series is Band of Brothers on HBO. And the reason that he enjoys Band of Brothers is, first of all, it's very down to earth.
Yeah.
And second of all, he said that it solved
Band of Bloody Sisters, am I right?
Amen, brother. And he said that it solved a lot of the problems that commonly crop up in war stories. And one of them is, it's very hard to distinguish military people from each other.
That's the whole point, because they're wearing uniforms.
It's a nightmare of storytelling. Yeah. And so in this, he has taken the same lengths to really distinguish each one of those people from the other. Again, there are some very, very clear parallels between certain members of this squadron and real-life snipers. For example, one of the youngest ones that they had was a 17-year-old young lady, and her name was... I don't have this one written down, but she was 17 years old, and she had a confirmed 39 kills in a Russian sniper unit. So she was very young to be taking that many lives, Michael, but she did it anyway. And there's a parallel to that in the comic, the red-haired one.
Yeah, I can't remember her name, the red-haired one.
Yeah, I can't remember her either. But the tension is brought into even sharper focus by Nita. Is it Nita? No, Riza. Sorry. Riza, who is the propaganda member of their squadron. She is part of the NKVD, which was a pre-runner to the KGB at the time, and she is constantly pushing the propaganda agenda of the Russian for the glorious motherland, for the colonel, for the colonel, for the teach these fascist sons of bitches what to do. And one of the things that I think Garth Ennis does really well is he shows how little these women believe in that bullshit. They laugh at Riza quite often. And Riza is very detached from the violence of the war because she will always congratulate the girls. And then Sara seems to take a little bit of pride in pointing out, it's like, well, we did kill this many people and it's a little bit bloody out there. And Riza gets very uncomfortable with those moments. And she seems to enjoy twisting that particular knife and showing Riza that it's not all propaganda and glory. It's quite a lot of death. There's a scene in issue 3 where Sara and her squadron have to take out a group of Nazis that have been advancing their way through quietly.
Where they stumble across them.
They come across a tank.
And they capture a tank.
And they have to take out the tank. And Riza can't wait to show everyone how they did it. And the story gets published. And Sara very quickly points out, yeah, but no one was in the tank. If they had been, we wouldn't have survived. Because traditionally snipers are useless against... tanks.
Can't bloody snipe a tank, Ben.
Yeah, you can't snipe a tank. It's bloody big.
You can shoot the man if he pops his head out.
If he pops his head out, but only if he's a gobshite.
Yeah.
And pops his head out. And no really battle-hardened person's ever popping their head outside the tank.
She does get one guy like that.
Yeah, and I think that was to show how stupid it would be to pop your head outside the tank.
Why would you pop your head out of the tank?
One of the things I find really interesting and probably shows Garth Ennis' love of war stories is how realistic a lot of those combat techniques actually are.
Yeah.
One of the ones that becomes a recurring plot device in this is the grenade under the body. And what you do is you take, well, not what you do is, because you won't do that, and I'm not saying this is an expert. What I learned from this comic, Michael, is that if you pull the pin on a grenade and place it under a body with the weight of the body pressing down on the handle, it stops the grenade from going off. And what happens is, usually, a comrade of the person that you have slain or killed comes along and will check the body, and they'll kick the body over to see who it was. And when they kick the body over,
Kablumo.
the handle's released and blammo. And one of the really interesting things here is Rena, who is the head of the squadron. Rena is the head of the squadron.
The blonde one.
She will often argue with Sara over this tactic because Sara does it like breathing. It's just something she does to everybody that she finds so she can get more. And Rena doesn't believe in it. She says there's no need to do that. And she says it's war. There is a need to do it. It's just one less thing. And I think by issue 3, we start to see the flashbacks to Sara's training, and we see how adapted she is to it, because she gets the terrible news that her family may or may not have been killed by fascists.
Winky wink, Ben.
Winky wink. And so she dedicates herself to eliminating all of them. She says, every Nazi bastard I find from now on dies. Mm-hmm. But it's only later we find out why she's lost her glimmer for the propaganda and why she says subversive things, which Rena is always trying to encourage her not to say. Because if Riza hears that, she will report it back to the NKVD, who will then disappear Sara.
Off she goes.
Because she's not safe, because that's what's happening in Russia at that time. And we find out that Sara, while at a propaganda medal pinning ceremony, found out that her family was eliminated in a purge.
By the bloody Russians. Not by the Germans at all, Ben.
Which was a common thing that was practiced at that time. First of all, to boost morale, but primarily to save on food.
Did you say to Bruce morale?
To boost morale. To boost morale. And it was actually to conserve resources. They would go in, purge entire towns, and remove them from the waiting list of food.
And blame the Germans.
Which was 2 birds with 1 stone. And Sara finds this out a little bit later. And we see what is fantastic character development, because she wanders into the woods and kind of grows a personal vendetta against a sniper who is as good as her.
Better
to a large degree. And she takes it as her personal mission to eliminate this man.
Mm-hmm. No, I think she's given the mission.
She's given it, but she's encouraged not to take it by the rest of the girls. The girls say, we'll do it together.
Okay.
And she slips out in the middle of the night to take care of it herself, because to her mind, she's the only one who can do it. Mm-hmm. And we find out, this is how the story climaxes. She defeats...
No, by the end.
Sorry, do you want me to...
No, we have to talk about
the
ending.
As the ending goes along, she dies in this pursuit. But it turns out that it's not one sniper who's better than her, it's 2 who work together in tandem. Yeah. And the mistake that was made is that it was one man. They thought it was one man doing it. And there is a little bit of, I think Garth Ennis is undermining maybe the more revisionist side of history, where she's called the red bitch by the Nazis, and the Nazis believe that it's one woman, and Sara believes that it's the unit that's doing it. She is the best of the unit, but she doesn't believe that she has 300 confirmed kills.
She doesn't.
She thinks that it's the unit that has been amassed into this one figure.
Yeah.
But her myth has grown so much within her squadron and outside her squadron that even the people on her team say, no, I think it's Sara. And they believe in the red bitch, and they believe that it's Sara. But I think that's Garth Ennis' way of saying it probably wasn't one person. It's very unlikely that was anything but propaganda to show that Russian women were strong and fierce, and not that Russian women aren't strong and fierce.
But then they bloody Ben, you know that from experience, if you know what I'm saying. But then they fall for the trap themselves. Yeah, because then it's 2 of them.
Yeah, it turns out that it's 2, at least 2, and she falls for it. She doesn't wait. She slips her cover, because at the beginning she is a well-oiled machine. She follows all protocol, all things like that. We're treated to a fantastic scene in issue 1 and 2 where she's working out the mental arithmetic around how she's going to take out that. She's given a high-level target. They want him assassinated right as he gives the Heil Hitler salute, the famous Nazi salute, because that would really undermine the Nazis. Right as their symbol is done. And you can see her working through. She has kind of a Sherlock moment from the BBC series where she works out all the angles and starts to do that. And eventually she pulls it off with aplomb and walks away victorious. The copycat, the German foil to her, the counterpart that she has on the German side, does the exact same thing.
Does the exact same thing to her.
And it's a taunt to Sara. It's showing him that I am as good as you, and I will eliminate your team. Okay.
I didn't think it was. I don't think it was.
Go on.
I thought it was just a parallel. I don't think it was.
It was a common task.
Yeah, I don't think it was I think a lot of it was to show. The interesting thing for me about this is she discovers that her team killed her family. Right? So she signs up initially hating the Germans and wanting to get back at them.
Absolutely.
But then when she dies, she's not fighting to defend Russia anymore.
Yeah.
She's fighting to defend her
team.
band of sisters.
Yeah.
That's, I thought, the most interesting thing. And the other parallels that happen through it, like the leader of both sides being killed.
Yeah.
And the falling for the same tricks and it turning out to be 6 of them and turning out to be at least 2 of them.
Yeah.
I think all of that was showing that they were basically all
the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That I didn't think it was targeting her. I don't think they would have even been able to tell that it was her.
Which one it was, yeah.
Because if it was, they could have just shot her there and then.
She was
standing
that's
right
true.
in front of him.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, fair enough. That's a much better reading of it, to be fair, in a thematic sense.
That's what I thought.
I'd be inclined to agree with you.
Here's the thing, Ben. Let's talk about this now. Do you think she got him with the grenade?
I don't.
It's a bit of a bloody
Well,
No
they
Country
leave
for Old
it.
Men ending.
Yeah,
Isn't it?
it's good. I would be inclined to think she probably didn't. I think he's a very well-trained sniper and probably knows that trick quite well. And considering they worked in pairs, because it shows at the end he's the disciplined one, because she knew this rule at the beginning. She says you don't break cover until you're absolutely certain. You have to wait a minimum of 30 minutes undercover, because they'll wait as well and they'll try and pick you off when you break cover. And she knew this at the beginning, but you can see as she goes along, she lost the discipline that came with her training because she stopped believing in what she was doing as a machine. And so there's an emotion element to it. Whereas he gets her because she breaks cover too soon. I think he's still highly trained. And I'm not saying he won't have a similar issue later in his career, but we never see that man. He's a faceless man. It would be a lovely end if she gets him.
Do you think so?
From a personal, probably not actually. Bloody war comics are tough, aren't they?
Isn't it bloody war? I don't think it would be a lovely end. I think it's best left ambiguous. I think it was a perfect decision to leave it ambiguous.
Which brings us to the next thing, I suppose. This comic wouldn't be anything without Steve Epting.
Bloody Steve. Well, it would.
Elizabeth
Script.
Breitweiser. I'm assuming it's Breitweiser and not Breitweiser, but I'm not sure where she's from. So I'm going to go with the German spelling, which is Breitweiser. We'll do the L classic VW. My God, such composition, Michael.
Now, Ben, the
Such
composition.
action.
Ben, did you think they were a little bit sexy to be Russian sniper ladies?
They're a little bit idealized. A little
Just
bit
a little
idealized.
tiny bit.
Not all of them, but a lot of them are very sexy.
The one who's very based on the realistic woman is
Sara.
very realistic. But Sara and Mary, the one with the black hair.
Yeah,
and
Sarah's a little too sexy, so is Mary.
They're all a bit Jennifer Lawrence.
Yeah, they are actually.
It looks like a little gang of Jennifer Lawrences.
Yeah. Fair enough. But I do think, in terms of, you have to sell it somehow, Michael. Yeah. But I think it's just beautifully illustrated in general, Michael. The one scene that I have a real issue with is this one here, Michael, where she's facing down the whole army, and you can see that they're very poorly rendered little 3D models that have just been copied across the top.
Right. Well, this is the one thing that struck me, Ben. In previous issues, in previous episodes of the bi-weekly, monthly comic book collecting issues,
go on.
You've ranted and raved about
tracing.
Not necessarily just tracing, but things like inserting reference. I don't know how to describe it, Ben. I don't know the technical
tracing.
term. But putting in real photos, real trees, for example. Just putting real trees in the background.
It's real lazy.
And drawing over them. I thought that this looked like that sometimes.
It does, definitely.
Do you think that's happening in this? And why are you okay with it here?
I'm not okay with it in those places. I just pointed it out to you, Michael. I'm really not okay with it. There's another good example of it there.
You're going to have to explain it, Ben, because the listeners can't see.
So there's an example. A lot of the times, a lot of this takes place in forests and tree lines.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to draw consistent tree lines.
Is it?
It takes a lot of effort.
Or just boring?
That too. Yeah, I think it's probably more boring. And so occasionally you will see just a casual Photoshop brush dragged across the top and given a thing, or a photo stuck in with a little bit of matte painting overlay.
Do you think that's what's going on?
Absolutely. In certain cases, absolutely. And you're right. It is shite. and I hadn't considered it, and now I am considering it, and you've ruined it for me.
Oh, have I?
No, you haven't ruined it completely, because I do think some other panels are very dynamic. For example, the one just above that. So at one point, Sara straps the other sniper to a tree and leaves him there with glass.
Yeah.
Showing to twinkle. So he's shot by his own partner.
Yeah.
Which is very entertaining. But you're absolutely right. There is definitely some tracing there. And it should be shunned, Michael. Disgraceful behaviour. But I do think there are other panels, for example, the last panel, which I'm a big fan of, that are beautifully composed. In terms of a gritty, realistic style, Michael nails it square between the eyes. Suits the story perfectly, to my mind. Some of the explosions are very shitty as well.
Some of the explosions, I have a feeling that a lot of the vehicles are photoshopped.
Very possibly, yeah.
They're very... Ben, I used to be a World War II model maker, as you know.
Yeah,
recovering World War II model maker. And a lot of the vehicles are very, very accurately depicted. Very accurately.
Could be a matte
depicted.
painting.
I think some of them might be reference photos.
Did it take you out of it?
No, actually. I was left thinking about why you were so against it, to be honest. Because
this is an example of very well done matte painting. They're not all like that. Sometimes it's just pure lazy.
Who does it? Is it the artist or the colorist?
I can't remember his name. No, it's the artist.
It's the artist who does it.
Yeah.
No, I'm not asking about a person. I'm asking in the process.
It's the artist who makes the choice.
Like, let's say here, right? We have a panel here where the rest of the Russian army has arrived to save the lads.
Yes.
Right? Those two tanks are probably drawn from reference.
Almost certainly.
From reference.
No, hang on.
Drawn from reference, I think.
From reference is not the same as...
I know. Yeah.
Okay,
That's
sorry,
what I'm
just
saying.
checking.
These are drawn from reference, they're not traced.
Yeah.
These soldiers are all drawn.
Yes.
Those trees there are drawn.
Yeah.
Those explosions are a Photoshop effect.
Almost certainly.
That backdrop is a Photoshop effect.
Almost certainly.
Who put the explosions and the photo and the background in?
Steve Epting.
Artist Steve Epting.
Steve Epting.
I think
it's an artist's choice.
I think there are situations in the modern world where that is not only acceptable but preferable
for pure realism.
Yeah, for the comic the like of this.
Yeah,
I think for this type of comic, there's those mountains, Ben.
Yeah, those mountains
Someone
are definitely
hasn't hand-drawn
photoshopped.
those mountains.
No.
But what I'm saying is, I'd rather that type of well done photoshopping than a hastily scribbled mountain.
But as I said, that is a hand done, or that is a well done example of what it is. It can very often be very shittily done, which is where I have an issue with it. I will show you some examples next week, Michael.
Everybody knows, Ben, that cars are hard to draw consistently.
They are.
Why not just stick in a bloody Photoshop of a car?
Well, they do that now.
I mean,
there's no one arguing this point with you, Michael.
Is it a lack of artistic merit that would...
I don't know if it's a lack of artistic merit. I think it depends on what you're producing the comic for. Mm-hmm. I think in this case you're right. It absolutely suits because it's a very specific type of vehicle at a very specific time.
Yeah.
And it's really important to have those things technically and accurately drawn.
No, it's not.
For certain vehicles.
It's not really important. Like, you could still enjoy a comic like this rendered in a cartoon style.
Well, I think it's probably up to the wishes of Steve Epting and Garth Ennis.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Steve Epting has made his career drawing espionage comics, and in general, he's made his career on accurate comics, like war comics and stuff like that. That's his thing. And it suits because, as you can see, he does very muted color palettes, very grimy stuff. It doesn't really suit superheroes in the right way for when he wants to draw them, especially in today's modern comic book landscape where a more cartoony style and cell shading and stuff like that has become all the rage again. So it does suit him to do this kind of project. In general, you're right. I need to kind of revise my stance on it, I suppose, going forward. But in general, it's probably a point of artistic merit thievery. I don't know. I just don't. It's not the same. I don't know.
We'll bloody see, Ben.
We'll bloody see.
Ben, if people enjoyed this, what else should they bloody read?
Well, as I just mentioned there, Steve Epting's work on Captain America, when he did it with Ed Brubaker, is fantastic. The whole Winter Soldier saga that inspired the movie, etc., is done by Steve Epting and Ed Brubaker, and it's absolutely fantastic. Great comic. Very, very different from this in that it's espionage and covert operations as opposed to battlefield things, which is something Garth Ennis hates, as it turns out.
Espionage?
No, he doesn't like those in the stories. He thinks that they're glorified as if everything that happens in a war happens behind the scenes.
Okay.
And he says it very often detracts from what people have given on the battlefield. So he says he prefers an open battlefield story, and it was really important for him to tell one like this. So that's a good example. You can check out Garth Ennis's War Journal series for Punisher. Very similar again in style and that kind of thing. You could check out some of the other TKO Studios things, which I had a little bit of a look at, all of which are relatively realistic and well rendered. This seems to be the kind of thing that they're going for. I think it's probably given away a little bit in the name of the publishing label, TKO Studios, not necessarily TKO Publishers. They're going for a more cinematic style of comic book.
Oh, you think so? Printed in the USA. Oh, most comic books are printed in the USA, aren't they?
Yeah, I don't know if that's...
Where are comic books printed?
I don't know.
Let's bloody check
I
that.
don't know.
Hold on,
Can't get on board with that. I don't
Where
know.
do IDW print their comics? Hold on, let's have a quick look. Ben, I would also recommend the movie starring Jude Law. Jude Law is the sniper.
Behind Enemy Lines? No,
Enemy at the Gate. No, but I'm saying the film should be called Jude Law as a Sniper.
Jude Law as a Sniper,
Yeah.
which is also Enemy at the Gates.
Yeah, that's...
which features all around that.
Yeah, it revolves around a Russian sniper and his relationship with a political officer.
Class.
Or, you know, if you want a bit of just Russians going up against the system. Russians going up against the system, and you roll your eyeballs over Chernobyl.
Yeah, Chernobyl is great. And then, as Garth Ennis himself pointed out, Band of Brothers. If you're into that gritty, in the bunkers, in the trenches, camaraderie kind of vibe, go and give it a bloody look-see. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen,
thanks again to Cron.
Thanks again to Crom, who did an amazing recommendation job there. Did anybody else read it? Have you read it? What did you think of it? What did we miss? What did you love?
What did you miss? We didn't miss any shots.
We didn't miss any shots. No, Sarah doesn't miss any shots, eh? Hey,
see what I've done?
You can get in touch with us as usual on the Facebook group where we discuss these kinds of things. There's the Instagram, you can get in touch with us there. And there is seomrabeag.com, which is SEOMRABEAG.com.
It means tiny room in Irish.
It means tiny room in Irish. And let us know what you thought. It was a good read. We're looking forward to it. I don't know what we're doing.
What are we doing next time?
What
are we doing in 2 weeks' time? Another comic?
Another comic book. I was going to do a pitch right now, but we haven't discussed it, so you might not like it.
Go on.
Headlopper by Image Comics.
Okay, yeah, I'll go with that.
It's a fantasy minimalist Conan the Barbarian style.
Well, it's very different from what we've been doing, isn't it? So yeah, let's do that.
So
then.
Headlopper by Image Comics. So we'll be doing
Volume
that
1
in 2 weeks. Headlopper Volume 1, Book 1 of Headlopper. We'll be taking a look at it in 2 weeks. Let us know what you think. Give us your opinions. Bye-bye.
Bye.